Candace Owens has officially gone from the suer to the suee. She's gone from being the plaintiff to the defendant. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is Winnie the Westie. And no, this is not a new office. I'm using someone else's car for today's vlog, and the problem is it's a Tesla.
And I think I'm in love.
That being said, I have, I think, another 2.5 years on the lease of our Subaru. I don't believe in having two cars unless it's absolutely necessary, so this luxury may just have to wait another couple years. Now, on the legal front, it would seem that Candace Owens, who was suing Facebook in another series that we have broken down, has now become the defendant in a defamation lawsuit against her. Circuit Court for Baltimore County, Maryland. To Candace Owens, Kimberly Klacik versus Candace Owens, writ of summons.
You are hereby summoned to file a written response by pleading or motion within 60 days after service of this summons upon you in this court to the attached complaint filed by Kimberly Klacik.
Full disclosure, I am a Montreal lawyer. I am a Canadian citizen, so I am not familiar with all of the politicians in America. I did not know who Kimberly Klacik was before reading this lawsuit. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, but that is my best guess as to how it's pronounced. But not knowing who Kimberly Klacik was, I had to do a little bit of research, and if you are like me and did not know who this politician was, just a brief history of who she is. From the Hill, former Maryland GOP congressional candidate Kimberly Klacik has filed a defamation suit against conservative commentator Candace Owens, seeking $20 million in damages after she said the pundit publicly made false allegations about her that cost her a book deal and other opportunities. Klacik rose to prominence last year during her bid to fill the late Rep. Elijah Cummings' congressional seat. She went viral at the time for a digital ad bashing Democratic Party leadership in Baltimore, saying then, quote, "Black people don't have to vote Democrat," end quote. She was backed by a number of prominent conservatives, including former President Trump, and brought in millions in fundraising, much of it from out of state, according to The Sun. However, she ultimately lost the election by more than 40 percentage points to now Democratic Rep. Kwesi Mfume. Being new to this story, one thing I immediately asked myself was whether or not she lost the election potentially or arguably as a result of the alleged defamation, but no, she lost the election well before the alleged acts of defamation, so no correlation between those two events. April 2020 special election, Klacik ran in the special election for Maryland's 7th congressional district to replace Cummings, who had died in October 2019. After winning the Republican primary, she faced Kwesi Mfume, a former Democratic holder of the seat. In the general election, Klacik received 25.1% of the votes, losing to Mfume, who received 73.8%. Klacik went on to lose the November 2020 elections by roughly the same massive margins, but apparently she raised millions and millions of dollars in campaign funds, which becomes relevant because one of the allegedly defamatory statements that Candace Owens made about Klacik is that she committed campaign fraud with respect to those funds. But we're getting ahead of ourselves as relates to the allegations of the lawsuit, so let's just jump into the lawsuit, read over these allegations, because some of them are kind of juicy.
Juicy smoothie. Y'all never heard of juicy smoothie? Juicy smoothie.
Complaint and demand for jury trial. Defendant Candace Owens admits that 1. She is, quote, not an investigative journalist, end quote. 2. The allegations she made were, quote, talking about a federal crime, end quote. 3. She, quote, had no proof, end quote, cannot possibly verify, end quote, and, quote, could not confirm, end quote, information she presented as fact. And 4, quote, the only reason defendant started this was because of what started as a petty Twitter feud, end quote. Defendant's admissions attendant to defendant's publications of false and defamatory statements alleging that plaintiff Kimberly Klacik engaged in criminal activity established the foundation of Ms. Klacik's defamation claim against defendant. Now, this introductory paragraph I think is a strategic mistake, especially in light of the decision that came out in both the Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson defamation cases, more specifically as relates to the Rachel Maddow defense. We're going to get into this a little later, but I do think this opens the door to the defense that Candace Owens specifically said she doesn't know if what she's saying is true, therefore it must necessarily be opinion. Following the allegation in this introductory paragraph, the plaintiff herself is basically stating up front that the defendant, Candace Owens, couched all of her statements with the caveat that none of it could be verified, none of it was verified, so I suspect Candace Owens is going to say basically everyone knew it was just my opinion. So I think the plaintiff may have started this lawsuit off by in fact shooting herself in the foot, but let's just go ahead and read some of the allegedly defamatory statements that Candace Owens allegedly made about Klacik. Specifically, defendant affirmatively accused Ms. Klacik of tax fraud, campaign fraud, money laundering, illegal drug use, and acting as a, quote, madame, end quote. There was no truth to the allegations. I may once again be showing my ignorance or naivete, but I don't know what a madame is. I mean, I know what it is in French, I just don't know what it is in this particular context, so I'm gonna have to go and check out the Urban Dictionary to see exactly what a madame means in this context. The lawsuit then goes over the parties, the jurisdiction. I presume Klacik chose the jurisdiction of Maryland because she thinks it's going to be favorable to her and or hostile to Candace Owens. We have done tons of vlogs on defamation, so we are not going over the criteria for defamation except to highlight that because these are public figures, we are going to have to allege actual malice as relates to the false statements that damaged the reputation of the plaintiff. Getting back to the allegations of fact, and it would seem that the allegedly defamatory statements were made in one of Candace Owens' live feeds on her wildly popular Facebook page. On June 22, 2021, the defendant published a live video on defendant's Instagram and Facebook accounts. A true and correct transcript of the video is attached to the complaint as Exhibit 1. The duration of the video is 44 minutes and 5 seconds. The video has since been republished on social media platforms, including on YouTube, by individuals who, upon information and belief, have personal relationships with the defendant. In the video, the defendant affirmatively accuses Ms. Klacik of engaging in criminal activity. Specifically, defendant made bold, untrue allegations that include Ms. Klacik, quote, used campaign money to do cocaine, end quote, participated in, quote, money laundering, tax fraud, and campaign fraud, end quote, paid vendors in order to, quote, move money off the books, end quote, was the person who helped bring a lot of strippers, end quote, into a strip club that defendant alleges was owned by Ms. Klacik's estranged husband, was a, quote, madame of that strip club, end quote, and, quote, has been scamming people for millions, end quote. Then plaintiff makes certain allegations which, in my humble opinion, are going to facilitate Candace Owens raising not the Rachel Maddow defense, but the Tucker Carlson defense. And for those of you who may have forgotten, recall that Tucker Carlson was sued for defamation for accusing the plaintiff of having engaged in extortion, and ultimately his defense was granted in that he said, when I used the term extortion, it was hyperbolic, it was supposed to be an opinion, no one would have taken that statement to be a statement of fact. And while I always say do not publicly accuse anyone of having committed a crime because that will land you with a defamation lawsuit, I do think there is some substance to Tucker Carlson's defense in that when he was saying that she was guilty of extortion, he wasn't making it as a statement of fact, because as a pure statement of fact, she was not found guilty of extortion. Everyone ought to have known that he was saying, in his opinion, what the plaintiff did was engage in extortive behavior. That being said, do not publicly accuse anyone of having committed a crime because it will land you with a defamation lawsuit. But on with the allegations that I think are going to bolster Candace Owens' defense. Defendant also admitted that she, quote, had no proof, end quote, cannot possibly verify, end quote, and, quote, could not confirm, end quote, the criminal allegations. Nevertheless, defendant continued to publish and republish as fact that Ms. Klacik engaged in criminal activity and that defendant's, quote, investigation, end quote, supported these claims. I appreciate that the plaintiff is not hiding what I feel to be bad facts, although reading this lawsuit, I get the impression that the plaintiff thinks that these allegations bolster her claim, whereas I actually think these allegations totally undermine her claim. The plaintiff is basically clarifying that when Candace Owens made her allegedly defamatory statements of alleged fact, she said she had no proof for them, could not substantiate them, and so would any reasonable viewer take those to be statements of fact when Candace Owens herself is saying, I have no proof for these and I can never prove these as fact. If you make a statement and say, I cannot prove this, I am not capable of proving it, I have no evidence to prove it, are you making a statement of fact, or are you in fact just making a statement of opinion? To be determined, but I suspect this is going to be Candace Owens' defense on a motion to dismiss ASAP. Later that day, defendant responded to counsel for Ms. Klacik via electronic mail stating that, quote, nothing defendant said in her video constituted defamation of character, end quote, all facts she made are backed by truth, end quote, and that defendant had, quote, every right under the law to inquire about campaign finances, end quote. On June 25, 2021, in response to defendant's email, counsel for Ms. Klacik sent an additional letter to defendant and defendant's attorney reiterating that the criminal allegations were false and that all legal options would be explored in the event the video is not removed from social media platforms. Needless to say, and this should not come as a surprise to anyone who is mildly familiar with Candace Owens, she did not bow to the demand, she did not remove the videos, and now she is facing a defamation lawsuit. Count 1, defamation per se. Paragraphs 1 through 40 are incorporated by reference as if fully stated herein. Defendant has intentionally, knowingly, and or recklessly published and disseminated false and defamatory statements to third parties of and concerning Ms. Klacik that have caused and continue to cause substantial injury to Ms. Klacik's reputation and business, among other things. Klacik then goes on to allege having suffered various damages, including having lost a book deal as a result of the allegedly defamatory statements made by Candace Owens. She makes a very generalized statement alleging actual malice, which in my mind, in fact and in law, is not going to survive a motion to dismiss, but we will see. And she goes on to claim $20 million in damages. Now, defamation per se, we've seen this before. Defamation per se is just a statement that is defamatory on its face with no context necessary in order to understand the defamatory nature, as opposed to defamation per quad, meaning that you might require a little context in order... What's this beeping about? Seems I'm not allowed putting my foot on the brake while shooting a video, so now I know. As opposed to defamation per quad, which is a statement that requires some context in order to appreciate why it was allegedly defamatory. But that's the lawsuit. I don't think it's going anywhere, but I do think it is a risky lawsuit as well, because it does seem that some other people did in fact also have questions as to how Klacik disposed of the millions of dollars she raised in campaign funds. And so it's all fun and games to sue, but when you sue, you nonetheless expose yourself to having to answer certain questions, and you expose yourself to some scrutiny, and she might have some answers to provide as to what she in fact did with those millions of dollars she raised for campaign funds. Litigation is a two-way street, and I highly doubt Candace Owens is going to let this lawsuit go on any further just to expose the plaintiff to further scrutiny. I think she's going to make a motion to dismiss, and I think she's going to succeed on it for the same reasons Rachel Maddow and Tucker Carlson managed to have their respective defamation lawsuits tossed. But we will see. If you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below, because it feeds the algorithm.
Please, sir, I want some more.
If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. We've got merch, PayPal, Patreon, subscribers, all the other stuff, but the best place to support us is on Locals, where you can find Robert Barnes and I at
VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com.
All of my content is also on Rumble, so you can watch it there, but more important than any of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!